The ID Pro Manager podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is presented by WynnBET. WynnBET is now live in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Tennessee, and Virginia. From boosted same-game parlays to live in-game odds, WynnBET has what you need to win. Bet 100, get 100 at WynnBET.com or download the WynnBET app and start winning today. State restrictions apply.
Welcome back, everybody. It is Friday, and you are on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, watching the IDP Pro Players Podcast. I am Craig Reith. I'm not Brad. You've seen Brad, and he is off on special assignment, but Gary's here with us as always, the IDP tipster. Gary, how's your Friday going?
Just crashing shit as usual, man. How's it going? Well, it's been busy. My wife had her heart. What do they call it? I don't want to call it heart rehab, but she goes and does the treadmill thing and everything. She's doing that like 3 days a week now. So we got up early, went and did that. Got back here, crashed a little bit with what we had going on this morning, and glad to have Justin on here with us again. Well, actually, you've been on IDP Pro Players Pod, but the first time on Managers. So I'll let Craig do his thing because I've had too much coffee apparently.
Yep, and we do have a special guest with us this week. We have Justin. You can find him on Twitter at jmarkfootball. He is all over the fantasy industry and the gambling industry at this point now. Justin, how's your Friday going?
Pretty good. It's early here, 9 o'clock in the morning, so just getting my coffee in. I haven't had too much coffee like Gary yet.
Well, hopefully the coffee doesn't hit either one of you too early into the show here. But this week we're going to be going over some news that Justin has and kind of get to know him, what he's doing in the fantasy and gambling industries. And then we're going to be talking about free agency moves, a couple trades, and then we'll see how far we get into the linebacker signings that we have for your IDP leagues. But Justin, for our viewers that haven't seen you on before, tell us a little bit about yourself outside of the fantasy football and gambling industries.
Yeah, so I live in Iowa, in a small town called Winterset. It's where John Wayne was born and the Bridges of Madison County was filmed. That's about all they have to the name, but they hang on to that pretty strongly. And I love sports. I'm a big Chicago Bears fan, Chicago Blackhawks fan, and Iowa Hawkeye fan. And married, have a dog and a cat, and that's about it.
Yeah, I'm in Wisconsin. I'm not a Packers fan, but I swear that I hear just as much about the Bears from the Packers fans as I do about the Packers. It's certainly an interesting dynamic in the heart of the Midwest here.
For sure.
So how did you get started into writing and podcasting?
Yeah, so about, 12 years ago or so, I actually wrote for a company. They were very small, called the Farm Club. I just wrote Chicago Bears pieces, mainly player profile type things. And then I had kind of fallen out of it. But when Iowa approved gambling, I was looking for a gambling show and just kind of listening to the different ones. I found Sports Gambling Podcast with Sean and Kramer. Thought those guys were funny, so I became a big fan. I've been a fan ever since. And then about a year and a half ago, I saw that they were looking for some writers. So I thought, oh, what the heck? I've self-published a book. I like to write. I like sports. Why don't I just throw my hat in the ring? And at the time, editing manager Adam Pelletier, he was the one in charge of hiring. They were reviewing, different candidates and stuff. And I kept bugging him. I was like, all right, you got a decision? And I finally built this big spreadsheet tracker that tracked target share changes. And I was like, okay, I built this. I don't know if you guys want to use it, but I just want you to know that I'm ready to go when you guys are. And Adam goes, let's get you signed up. I like this. So I guess that was it. Being a pain in his ass paid off.
Cool. I got to ask, man, not to interrupt, but I got to ask, what was the book about?
Yeah. So it was just a fiction book. It touches on bullying, PTSD, and trying to fit into kind of social norms. Follows three people: a child that's bullied, a vet, and then a girl in high school. And then all three end up kind of changing each other's lives.
Man, where can they find that?
It's on Amazon. It's called Adjust. So if you just type in "Adjust" by Justin Mark, it'll pull it up.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's really, come to the forefront here, even in the past few years, just the whole mental health thing and, anti-bullying, accepting people. So it's great that you even have a book about that.
Yeah, thank you.
So we know from following you on Twitter and seeing your stuff that you're really big into this version of the XFL. It seems like, the past couple of years has been a different version of it. And of course, the famous one back in, I think it was the early 2000s, Vince McMahon started. What's the latest news in this version of the XFL, and how's the season going?
Yeah, it's going good. It's been a lot of success, it seems like, so far. St. Louis finally had their first home game last weekend. They had 38,000 people. That's the biggest crowd that they've had so far for the XFL. And they play in a dome, so it was loud. Last night, there was a game between the best defense and the best offense. I unfortunately have to tell you guys, the best defense lost, the best offense won. So the Houston Roughnecks with the best defense lost their first game to the Seattle Sea Dragons.
Man.
Gary didn't want to hear that.
I know.
Yeah, you didn't have to say it that way. God.
Yeah. So, the XFL, do you kind of think it's going to have staying power this time around? I know that the backers are different, with The Rock and sort of the cohorts that he has with him. Does this feel a little bit more stable than, I think the pandemic, had unfortunately a big part of why that other version died off. But are you hopeful that it's going to continue?
Yeah, I am. I think they're putting together a good product. Last year we saw the USFL it was one of the first spring leagues to find success throughout a full year, play their championship. And so I think a lot of people kind of caught on to, there is still more football, we don't have to wait. And now there's the XFL, so there's even more football. So I think that the fanatics like myself that just love watching football, they're going to grasp onto it. And then having a backer like The Rock, I mean, that guy doesn't fail at much. So I think that definitely helps. And at the same time, they have enough money that in the first year or two, if they're in the red, I think they're going to be okay because they have strong financial backers.
Yep, that's always important. And we're going to be digging into a couple players on offense and hopefully defense too that have stood out to you right after this.
WynnBET is the official online sportsbook of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. WynnBET is now active in Massachusetts and tons of other states. Be on the lookout for the WynnBET Win Hour each Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. During the WynnBET Win Hour, marquee games of the week will have better odds on WynnBET, giving you a larger payout opportunity. And March Madness is here. So many ways to bet on the big dance. Sign up today and receive a special offer. Bet 100, get 100, limited state availability. And of course, 4RD Gents. Only if you hit the biggest long shot of the week, you get $1,000 free credit. There's so much to choose from. All you have to do is head over to wynnbet.com or download the WynnBET app. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions at wynnbet.com. Must be 21 or older and present in the state where playthrough WynnBET is available. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call 1-800-522-4700.
All right. And speaking of players, we're going to just touch on the offensive players here quickly. Gary, you can plug yours or whatever you need to. But, over the course of the different versions of the XFL, we've seen different players have success and then come over to the NFL and have success. More recently, your PJ Walkers, Donald Parhams, those type of guys. Previously, in years gone by, Tommy Maddox, Rod Smart, He Hate Me, who I have a jersey and a signed mini helmet of. And I also have a original Orlando Rage ball cap. Loved that original XFL. But in the current version here, any offensive players standing out to you that you think could end up making that jump to the NFL in the future?
Yeah, I think there are. Quarterbacks, it's a little tough because, the guys that are standing out are guys that have had their chance in the NFL. So whether they get a chance again, I don't know. AJ McCarron has really stood out, but that's a quarterback who's over 30 years old. So if a NFL team really wants to invest in him or not. Ben DiNucci has looked great. He throws a lot of picks, but he looks like the best kind of field general out there. I mean, he's telling his guys where to line up. He's reading the defense fairly well. And you see him working with the wide receivers when they've ran a bad route and it leads to an interception. He's not screaming his head off at them. He's saying like, hey, no, this is what you guys were supposed to do. So I think that leadership's kind of important. Where I think you'll see the most impact or crossover is at the wide receiver position, because I will say running backs have not really stood out. There haven't been any one guy that's really stood out for running backs, but wide receivers, Ja'Cour Pearson for the Seattle Sea Dragons, I could see him getting an opportunity in the NFL. Jeantre Kirkland of the Houston Roughnecks, he's another guy, and then Jeff Badette of the Vipers. These are all guys that they have special teams experience too. So like USFL last year, Kevontae Turpin really stood out for them as a wide receiver, but he was also a good return guy. I think these guys could jump over to the NFL, kind of make their mark as a return guy, but also find their way onto the playing field as a receiver and kind of step up that way.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these players that are there for running backs, kind of like quarterback you mentioned, they've had a cup of tea in the NFL already, or I think they're big names in college. Abram Smith was with the Saints for a bit. Max Borghi was a huge name in Devy football, and then just didn't end up panning out. Kalen Ballage, Raquel Armstead have had their time in the NFL. So, yeah, it's a lot of those sort of unknown names to the NFL that hope to be making their mark.
For sure.
Any on the defensive side for Gary that he can maybe put on his list to be watching in the future?
I wrote a couple down for Gary because I knew he would like to hear about him.
I'm getting my pen.
Yeah, so the tackle leader right now is Donald Payne, which I know when Gary and I talked about XFL guys before, he's kind of a guy that we mentioned to keep your eye on. Has had experience in the NFL, but he's shown up and kind of led the league in tackles. Trent Harris has led the league in sacks. He's got 6 sacks through 5 games, so pretty good stats. A couple defensive backs, Michael Joseph, he has 3 interceptions. 2 of them have been returned for touchdowns. So, you love to see a playmaker like that. He's tied to lead the league in interceptions with Sean Davis and Ajeen Harris. But a guy who doesn't necessarily stand out on the stat sheet, but his play has stood out to me, is Luke Barku. He doesn't have a lot of interceptions or a lot of tackles, but he's kind of shown that he's a shutdown corner. Really, you can really see it when they lined him up against Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon, NFL caliber talent, obviously fell out of the NFL for other reasons, but he's dominated most cornerbacks. Luke Barku is a guy that he could not dominate. He played him very well, played him close, couldn't shake him. And he looked like a true shutdown corner. So I think with some more time, he's only 24 years old. So a little more time, a little more development. I think he could be somebody you see in the NFL on Sundays being a shutdown corner.
Well, that's it. Yeah, just follow up the Dirty O with some freaking corner talk. That's the way we go here. Yeah. Roll on.
No, but I do think that is of note. I mean, Josh Gordon, it was in 12 games or something. Yeah. He led the league in receiving with a huge number. It went, granted, that was 10 years ago? Maybe it feels like it was 10 years ago if you've had him rostered. But
we might be losing Craig a little bit.
He does.
Let's give him a second. See if he catches up with us. There he is. You're with us.
About that.
No.
But yeah, that's certainly of note. Any other?
But a real quick question too. So I really like Payne coming in. I mean, from what I read, we collaborated back before the XFL played this year, and you helped me out a lot introducing me to some of these guys. Of course, it was a complete lottery draw. We didn't know who in the hell was going to be where doing what, but I did like Payne. All right, so is he? I mean, I know he's tearing it up, but is he actually, LB1 type material? If we happen to see him jump to the NFL, why isn't this guy in the NFL?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on what scheme he falls in, of course. But he fell out of the NFL because he had an injury, and you know how the NFL is. There's no patience. Next man up. So they got a next guy up who outperformed him at that time, and they said, all right, you're gone. So I think this is definitely going to get him a look. It's going to be a matter of if he can stay healthy in the NFL, but I definitely think he should get a look after this. He has looked fast. He's flying all over the field. And I mean, that's what you want in your linebacker.
Yeah, that's pretty wild what you mentioned. The whole linebacker position is just like the running back position. I mean, it's always next man up. So you can almost get the same damn near same production out of most guys just stepping up like that. It wasn't like that just 15 years ago. You wanted those running backs, and now it's like that's pretty wild how things have changed.
For sure.
Yep.
We'll get back into a couple more of Justin's favorites here in a minute.
We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is heating up for March Madness. College Pick'em is a great way to get in on the action, especially if your bracket's busted after day one. I know mine is. Plus, Underdog Fantasy has your favorite college basketball player props. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code SGPN for 100% deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code SGPN.
So we went over some offensive players, a couple of defensive players there. Are there any ones that you haven't mentioned, or guys that you did mention that are just becoming favorites of yours, or even someone on special teams?
Yeah, so the only guy I didn't mention is Laquel London. He leads the league in forced fumbles. He's a guy that I was really interested to see what he was going to do because he had been with my Chicago Bears for a while. Kind of went through training camp. I thought he was going to stick on the roster. He was there kind of in the background for 2 years, but never really got any playing time. So that's kind of a guy that I've kept my eye on, thinking like, the Bears have not been very good on defense the past couple years. Now that here's a guy that they did have who's producing in the XFL. And obviously that doesn't always translate from spring football to NFL. It is a next level of professional football, but he's somebody that I've watched, and he's played how I thought he was going to be. I thought he would come into the spring football league and do very well in the trenches, and he's done that.
Sounds kind of familiar, and this is going off script, so forgive me, but there's a guy that I'm actually really liked when I saw on the field for the Bears this past year, Dominique Robinson. So, he was a guy that was a wide receiver in like half of his college time, and he showed some flashes. He had to build himself into the role of being a defensive end. But how do you kind of feel about him on the Bears there in the future? Is he a guy that you have any hope for? Because you watch him more than I do.
Yeah, it really just depends what they're going to do with the line. I mean, they've been adding pieces through the free agency, but I do think he's a great developmental guy that could blossom into a rotational guy that can make a lot of noise in the NFL. I love guys with stories like that, like they played wide receiver or tight end or something like that, because they just have a lot of versatility. They're usually more athletic than some of those other guys that have just been on the defensive line. Not all of them, but more than some of them. So it's definitely interesting to watch that and see their athleticism kind of win out like over just the experience, because they don't have the experience there, but they do have the athleticism.
Well, we're going to switch gears here and sort of go into podcasting. We know you have the XFL Gambling Podcast. How's your season of podcasting going with the NFL? Why don't you name drop your co-host for us and anything you've sort of learned that would be helpful to people out there trying to get into XFL gambling?
Yeah, so we have the XFL Gambling Podcast as part of Sports Gambling Podcast Network. We have Colby Dant, who, if you don't know Colby Dant, he knows college football better than anybody I've met. He's got this brilliant mind where he can tell you, oh, yeah, this was the coach of Rutgers back in 1996, and this is the scheme he ran. Like, it's crazy the things he remembers in his mind. So a lot of these guys who, they didn't get their NFL chance, but they were good in college. He knows all about their college careers and everything. Then we have CJ Sullivan, who also knows sports, but is a comedian, and he is just a funny guy. It's hard for me to keep myself together when I'm on the show with them because he's cracking me up left and right. But yeah, we've done pretty good. I think if you've not gambled on XFL, the place to jump in is DFS. I feel like DFS has been easy to kind of hit some profit on, because a lot of people out there, they're not paying attention to the games. They're just guessing like, oh yeah, this guy looks good. This guy looks good. And you can start to learn kind of some of the matchups and what defenses are allowing tight ends or wide receivers more points and things like that. And that can really start to stand out if you just spend a little bit of time. You don't have to spend a lot of time and give you an edge, because again, a lot of these people out there playing DFS, they're playing it just to play it. They're not watching the actual games.
You're muted, Gary.
Boom, crash and burn. So anyways, when if you guys have not checked out his Justin and these guys' podcast, you got to. I mean, the entertainment value alone is out of the roof to listen to these dudes get their game on. So I definitely, and we're going to be talking about another one. I think we're going to recommend that too.
All right, and we're going to get to that right after this.
Fact. The National Breast Cancer Foundation reports that a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer every 2 minutes. And we already know finding new innovations in research, surgical options, and clinical trials is essential to finding a cure. And to all those fantasy football ladies that may be listening, we also know with early detection your survival rate goes up. And that's why breast self-exams are very important, and the best way to give your old girls their best fighting chance to win the championship. So, with all that being said, the fellas here at the IDP Pro Players Pod would like to remind everyone, the National Breast Cancer Foundation does take donations, so please, go and give what you can. And let's give our mothers, our wives, our sisters, and every woman, the support, the resources, and maybe even more importantly, the hope, by knowing we all really do care.
All right, and you got another podcast out there. This one is with your wife, the Old Fashioned Football Podcast. How did you guys kind of decide to start that up? And, how do you feel? I'm guessing you like it because you're continuing to do it and it sounds great. But from your end, the product that we see isn't always the same as, how you feel in the background. So have there been any learning curve or twists and turns with doing a podcast with your wife?
So this was the first podcast that I kind of took ownership over, right, and hosted. I had been on podcasts before as kind of a co-host here and there, but this is the first one that I took over. So there's definitely a learning curve there of learning how to keep it going, keep it flowing, and that's all the things. As far as though working with my wife, it's been really easy because we just obviously, when you have a podcast, you have to learn your co-host and how to build off of their cues and everything. Well, we've been married over 10 years, so I know all the cues. She knows all mine. So that's helped a lot. A little over a year ago, I was like, I think I kind of want to do a fantasy football podcast. I think it'd be fun. And I think it'd be cocool to review a whiskey while I do it, because those are two passions of mine: football, fantasy football, and whiskey. So I was telling her, I was like, man, I really want to do this. And she all of a sudden said, what if you had an old fashioned and drank the old fashioned and then reviewed the whiskey in it? You could call it old fashioned football. I was like, that's really good. I like that. So she gets all credit for the name. And I pitched it to the guys, Sean and Kramer, and they were like, I like this idea. Why don't you do kind of a pilot episode? Let us know what it would be like. And I was like, all right, now I got to find a co-host. And I asked her, I said, you're in all these fantasy football leagues with me. You love fantasy football. She's highly competitive and she kicks our ass all the time. Like, some of my friends are like, why did you invite her again? I'm tired of her beating us. Because she's very competitive. So she puts in all the work and all the research to make sure she wins. But I thought, well, why don't we do the pilot together? And so we did that, and I sent it to Kramer to review. And he goes, I remember we had a meeting, and he goes, bro, I don't know if you intended on her being your co-host, but I think she needs to be your co-host. And we're like, perfect.
Yeah. No shit, man. I mean, you guys had me on there just a little while ago, and I could just see it. And not only do you guys have the husband-wife thing going on, but yeah, you could just see it. She's simmering. She's simmering right now. She's not even close to being done.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it's been a lot of fun. I've heard some feedback that some of the people, they like tuning in just to hear when we're going to argue, because we do get into bickerments over players. There's been things where I made the old fashioned drinks and I forgot to put the orange in them. And so there's all sorts of stuff we can get into there. But yeah, it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. And just piggybacking off of that. So we're under the SGPN Fantasy Football, and we're still part of SGPN, but on 4/4, we're launching to our own feed. So you'll be able to just, go to your Spotify or your Apple, look up Old Fashioned Football Podcast. So on April 4th, we're launching there, and we do have a big time guest to help us with the launch, former NFL player, is going to join us, and we're going to interview him and kind of talk a little football and talk about what he's
Oh,
up
come
to.
on. You got to tell us you're not going to want to. Was it a big ass surprise or what?
Yep,
Come on,
building the anticipation.
Bullshit, man.
Can you tell Gary if it's a defensive player or offensive player?
Yes.
At least?
Can you tell me that much?
It's a defensive player.
Oh, Gary, there you go.
Bingo.
You made Gary's day.
Yep.
Yes, you did. You just. Oh, I can't wait. Man.
But yeah, so we're excited about that. We say come for the football, stay for the whiskey, because we talk football for about, 35, 40 minutes, and then we review a whiskey for the last 15 to 20.
Nice.
And do you go the full spectrum of whiskey, or do you just probably stay on the higher end of it if you're trying to make a good drink?
We do everything. One of my favorites is Evan Williams Bottled and Bond. It's like an $18 whiskey, but it's one of my favorites. It's one of my go-tos. So yeah, we touch on a little everything, and we've had bourbons, rye, Irish. So yeah, we try to expand to all of them.
Back in my college days, which it doesn't seem like somehow it was that long ago, but my roommates and I tried every 40 in the grocery stores that we could find in our college town, and that did not end up going well half the time. But
I'm sure.
Whiskey is a different thing than just random beer that you find at a gas station or something. So
I've got this serious problem, and it doesn't matter any stage of my life, whatever point I'm at. I'm too damn cheap for that good shit, man. I am too cheap. Give me some good old Mad Dog back in high school. That was like $1.80 a bottle.
There you go.
And back then it used to burn going down. I think it's like Kool-Aid now, according to my 21-year-old son. This has been experimenting very well, I have to admit.
Back in my drinking years, I was really into Scotch. Scotch was my thing when I was in law school. And for graduating, my brother got me a bottle of Blue Label Johnny Walker.
Nice.
So that was like my high end with that. But yeah, whiskey is right in that same sort of vein. And it's a great idea. Being in Wisconsin, you're in the Midwest. Old fashions are just a way of life for people. You go out to dinner, you get an old fashioned. So
for sure.
Any other things you wanted to add about yourself or your podcast or what you have coming up here?
No, I think that was it.
All right. Well, we are going to dive into some free agent signings. We're going to do trades, a couple of trades that happen that are IDP relevant for even your larger leagues here. If you want to stay around and join us, that'd be great. Throw your 2 cents in. Gary doesn't like to do all the talking himself. He'll tell you that. So
I'm boring.
Well, I won't be on Gary's level of the knowledge on the defensive side here, but
bullshit.
But yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, like I said, we're gonna go into trades here. And one of Gary's favorites, I say it every time his name is mentioned, but Chuck Clark got traded from Baltimore to the Jets for a 7th round pick. So not a whole lot of return, but given his age and contract, it was kind of to be expected there. Gary, I'm going to throw it to you since I know you liked the guy back in the day, but how are you feeling about Chuck Clark moving over to the Jets?
Well, I get this feeling if they actually keep Jordan Whitehead, and which is the reason I'm mentioning that is the simple fact that, it's been rumored that they could drop him to save some cap money to get this Aaron Rodgers thing, and, other things are going on with them. So, but if they keep both, I'm hoping at least one of them freaking emerges as an IDP play this year. We've been teased with Marcus May. We haven't really, I hate to basically say this shit, but Jamal Adams, good years were the last time that we had some kind of consistency in fantasy football. Now in real NFL, man, hey, I love this duo. I hope that they keep Jordan and Jordan Whitehead and Chuck together. I think this is a great tandem. And, Chuck Clark is not like an elite guy. He's far from it, but he knows what he's doing on this field, and he won't be caught out of position. When it comes to Jordan Whitehead, he's actually, I think, better than what we've seen this past year. I think, learning a new system, coming in and running that system, for one thing, you're putting yourself in a different position than what you are as just doing it naturally. So if they do keep him and he stays, I expect to see a little bit of improvement in him. Who's going to be the main guy consuming the production? I really don't know. I mean, it's a coin flip. So pick your flavor.
And they also still have a couple other guys. Ashton Davis, I think they had drafted a couple years ago. Marcus Joyner's still on the team, and they have some safeties, college safeties that they drafted that they've turned sort of outside linebackers. So it's really interesting how they go about using these guys. Justin, any thoughts on Chuck Clark and his viability for IDP leagues going forward?
Yeah, I do think it depends on how that split happens, but I think he gets in a good spot. I mean, the Jets are a good defensive team, and Gary said it right. He's a guy that knows football well, and he seems to find his way to the ball. I mean, he had 101 total tackles last year, so that's a guy he knows where to be on the field. He's always in position to make plays. So I think if he gets a bulk of the start or snaps, I think he is somebody that could end up slotting into a spot here where he could be IDP relevant.
Do you play in any cornerback required leagues?
I only have one league right now that is IDP, and it's anything, can be anything. Okay. So yeah.
The reason I ask, we got Jalen Ramsey.
You told me that. We're gonna yeah.
Gary's gonna fix that. We're gonna get that.
Yeah. We're
it's all right, Gary.
You and Miranda, right? Miranda, we're going to get you guys just sucked into this shit. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Right.
But for the second time in a couple of years here, Jalen Ramsey got traded, this time from the Rams to Miami. It was largely a contract move, as the Rams are starting to clear some of that out for the future. It feels like they got a 2023 third and tight end Hunter Long back for Ramsey. It kind of felt light to people. He's only got 1 year left, I think, on his deal, but they really weren't going to be looking to resign him with the way that team is moving. Jalen Ramsey has had viability in just defensive back leagues because of the way that he's used and the plays that he makes. How are you feeling about this fit with him with those other defensive backs like Javon Holland, Brandon Jones, Xavier Howard there? Justin, we'll go to you for this one.
So Jalen Ramsey is an interesting player because I was just talking to him with Rod Villagomez, who hosts the NASCAR gambling podcast and all those. He's a big 49ers fan, and he said, you know what? I watched a lot of Jalen Ramsey for the Rams last year, and he always got cooked, which I think when you're watching it from a football aspect, yeah, he does get burned a lot. But when I first was talking IDP with Gary, I guess – not being the IDP mind, I had never thought you don't want a cornerback in IDP that is a shutdown guy because they stopped throwing to him, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So Jalen Ramsey's a guy that they're not going to stop throwing at the wide receiver he's covering, but he still makes plays. I mean, 14 interceptions, 18 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles, and 88 tackles last year. He's still a guy that can make plays and be relevant IDP-wise, despite the fact that a lot of people say, well, he no longer has it anymore. And I think the defense on the Dolphins is getting better. And I think a lot of offenses are going to have to pass to keep up with the Dolphins, right? We saw they had a pretty efficient offense last year. So the opposing team is going to have to pass against them. So I still think despite getting cooked a lot on the field, I think he has relevancy in IDP.
Gary?
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to run off to the waiver wire and see if I can find this guy because he was a cornerback, which I think at first when he signed him, there was a little bit of a spit rumor that he might be moved to safety. Maybe I have the wrong team. I could be incorrect. Do not quote me, folks, but either way. Basically, it looks like he has lost his step. And if we look at somebody like the outlier Patrick Peterson, he's actually been serviceable for the last 2 years because they do like picking on him. And when he was up in Minnesota, I don't think he's going to be there this year. I don't think
he's with Pittsburgh.
Year. Right. I'm showing my old age because he's been up there for a little bit. When he was in Minnesota, they just kept playing him, kept starting him. Hell, if you just get him off the waiver wire, he was like juice. You just get all you want and come back for more. But so I could see that happening with him. I just wouldn't get stuck on the name or the position necessarily. I kind of preach. I think most of us do stream those cornerbacks, but he's definitely, if you're looking, there's an option.
All right. Well, we're going to move into our linebacker signings. And of course, these are sort of the bigger names we're going to start off with and then go down the line here. But the first two we have on our list went to the same place, the Chicago Bears. We got TJ Edwards from Philadelphia. He got a nice payday, 3 years, $19.5 million. And then Tremaine Edmonds was the big signing for them. Edwards signed first, and then they got Edmonds. And boy, they're going to have a very different linebacking core than they did from last year once they got rid of Roquan Smith. Edmonds signed for 4 years, $72 million away from the Bills. Gary, for IDP perspective,
no. He's a Chicago fan. No, pass.
I was going to get your word in first, and then let him just take the ball.
I started getting choked up already. So just go on.
All right, Justin. From a real life perspective, you just have to have you pretty excited for that defense. From a fantasy perspective, any worry for you that these two are kind of going to eat into each other in their production for their fantasy managers?
A little bit. I mean, and you have Jack Sanborn there too, who I think is a tackling machine. So now we really have three guys that are tackling machines. And so I don't think they're going to be able to reproduce their production when they were by themselves, right? From a football standpoint, I love this. We got two guys for the price of less than Roquan Smith.
Oh, yeah.
And they're obviously going to have more production because they're two people. So from a football standpoint, this
Pro Bowlers, right?
Yeah. This couldn't have been done better by Ryan Poles. I mean, I know they wanted to try to work it out with Roquan. It didn't work out. It's, it is a business. But yeah, having these two guys on the defense, I think, is great for the defense. But as far as IDP, I do think it's going to take a bit before you see who really takes over as that big dog. I mean, Tremaine Edmonds would probably be the guy, but they're going to eat into each other's production.
Were you surprised that they signed both of them, given that Sanborn showed out really well over that sort of 6-game stretch and that he's signed really cheap for a couple of years?
A little bit, but I think with the Bears needing to spend some of that cap and just the help we need all over the board, I think adding any kind of playmakers, even if you already have a playmaker at the position, is a smart football move.
It's unfortunate there weren't a lot of really good edge rushers or defensive linemen for them to pick from. I mean, but at least they did get their quality out of these two, and I got to agree. Where's the IDP production going to be? More than likely, we're going to end up with what you would call two upper LB2s, I suppose you could say, on a consistency basis. So I'm not knocking them. Maybe one of them will emerge. I wish Morrow would have got his look again, but maybe he moves on to the Patriots and just fades off into history because we won't be able to use him up there. But, there's a little rumor going around if you haven't heard. But either way, man, I feel for Jack Sanborn. If you're in a standard league, folks, I don't kill me, Justin, but he's droppable. He's droppable at this point.
No, I agree with that. I mean, they invested in these two, so these two are going to get their chances to shine over Sanborn.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see how you can't pencil them in as those starters. What do you think, Craig?
The thing with me is I play in generally a lot deeper bench leagues for my dynasty leagues because I like digging around even on the waiver wire to find deeper guys, and it creates a lot more trading. Unfortunately. So, I mean, Sanborn for me in those leagues is a hold just because he's apparently going to be in Chicago for a couple of years cheap. There's no reason for them to get rid of him. And if an injury happens, he should be able to just be plugged in there and get you production again. So, yeah, in the short term, it stinks, but it really is nice to see, again, from my weird perspective, being in Wisconsin, not a Packer fan, the Chicago Bears are doing moves to be able to try to move up the standings and finally get some of those Packer fans to shut up so I can stop hearing about it. But
I like it.
We'll be back talking about some more linebackers right after this.
Ever notice these days how things have changed with sports entertainment? Suddenly everyone is edgy and they don't mind offending people with offensive words. It's everywhere. Podcasts, to radio, to primetime TV. All I want are NFL defensive player reports, maybe a quick update on the best streaming corners, and yet I have to hear about the dirty O. That's right, offensive player discussions and hot takes blocking my path to the sweet defensive information I need.
Bullshit.
That was until I found the IDP Pro Players podcast. And now, unless the IDP Pros, John or Gary, mess up, I know I'm not going to be offended by their no dirty O approach.
Damn.
So take my word for it. Catch the Sports Gambling IDP Pro Player Podcast every week and leave the dirty O behind. So if you or someone you know has an IDP degenerate problem, that's terrific. And the fantasy move to make is to go follow a couple of the best veterans in the fantasy football industry. That was on Twitter at @IDPro. One word at the IDP Pro Players Pod.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Gary, I wanted to ask you about this next guy because he's a guy that flew under the radar of a lot of people, it seemed, this past year, but he was highly productive, and he's going to a nice spot, I think. We just talked about Miami. But David Long, linebacker, going from Tennessee to Miami, 2 years, $11 million, so not a ton of money each year, but he was really productive, especially in coverage when he was on the field for Tennessee. Going to that improving defense in Miami we talked about. How do you feel about him there next to Jerome Baker, who I know you're not the biggest fan of?
I don't see him being any different than Roberts. I mean, maybe he's a better player, yeah, but I'm not going to go and start chasing rainbows here and think that that there's a dolphin made out of gold down there on, it's just not worth chasing for me. I think it's sad. I like David Long. He's been on the verge. He's been there. The consistency. He just, can't stick his stake in it. And I don't think he's going to do it in Miami because they're not necessarily going to change the scheme. They've got the scheme set up with their defensive line. They brought Chubb in. They've already got the secondary. The linebackers, they need bodies. They need good, solid bodies. And we can see the way, like I said, I'm not a fan of Baker. I don't think he's as good as what they think he is. So apparently the talent level, mediocre. In the end, it's probably going to be just like this, what it was this past year or two, inconsistency. We don't have any linebacker plays that we can really depend on.
Justin, any thoughts on David Long?
Yeah, Gary hit it there that the scheme is just not going to favor the linebacker position, no matter who's really there. So, yeah, absolutely agree.
All right, well, the next one up here is a re-sign. You've seen him in Cincinnati since he was drafted. Jermaine Pratt is re-signing there for 3 years, $21 million. He got a nice bag for a guy that really is sort of an old-school linebacker in today's NFL, where he is really good against the run, but by and large, you don't really want him out there, and you don't see him out there as much against the passes. Coverage is not what he excels at. Do you kind of like this fit with them bringing the band back together like they're trying to do on offense as well there in Cincinnati, Justin?
Yeah. I don't know if he's going to have a huge IDP relevance as far as a top guy, but I definitely like it as a football move. He's like you said, old school and good football linebacker. So I think it definitely helps. Anytime you can keep guys in the building, especially guys that have shown some production, I think that helps your team overall.
Gary, with where they're sort of drafted historically here, are you liking him over Logan Wilson, knowing that he's going to cost you significantly less to get?
Damn, it's kind of funny you asked that question. Yeah, I just hold out and go with Pratt, to tell you the truth. I am actually now a little bit concerned about Logan Wilson getting a long-term contract. We'll see. This is only 3 years for Pratt. So, but I like Pratt. I've kind of fallen off the Wilson bandwagon a little bit. I also want to mention, when we look at this, there was already a huge amount of this free agency class that were a big portion of them were the linebackers, mainly inside linebackers, off the ball guys. So it's flooded this whole free agency when they turned around and started releasing Bobby Wagner and all these other inside linebackers. And in the process, I think that's why we're able to see guys like Edwards, Edmonds, even David Long, but Pratt, his demand wasn't there. The market's flooded. They don't have to overpay anybody. They're throwing these $6-7 million a year at these guys, and they're going ahead and taking it because I don't think, from a business point, that you can sit back and say, man, there's all kinds of teams and only a few of us. That's not how you got to look at it. You got to look at, man, there's a shit ton of us this year. I'm not getting paid big. I'm also, settle now and do what I got to do best for myself. So I think that's what we've seen happen here with Pratt. I think he's just as capable, if not more capable at times, to do what Logan Wilson does and do it just as well.
Well, the Pittsburgh linebacking core has been coal for fantasy managers the past few years, and we'll be talking about another type of coal joining them right after this.
Thanks for watching live over on YouTube. Make sure to smash that subscribe button and like this video on YouTube, and hit that notification icon to stay up to date anytime we go live.
So Cole Holcomb signed from Washington to Pittsburgh for 3 years, and they're really trying to fix that linebacking core as they have been since. Kind of feels like Devin Bush didn't pan out because he's gone, and I don't know if he actually did sign, or they're saying he might be signing with Seattle, but he's gone. Robert Spillane came back on a 1-year deal, I believe, but the guys that they had brought in previously, Miles Jack is gone. They cut him. Joe Schobert, of course, in season, he was gone. So they're really trying to fix this, and Cole Holcomb is coming over. Justin, I'll go to you on this one. Cole has been productive, but it kind of feels like he fell out of favor in Washington. He does kind of seem to fit the kind of linebacker that they could use there in the middle. Do you have hopes that he can sort of rebound and get up to that, second tier of linebackers in fantasy leagues?
I do. I like this move. Aside from the Bears signings, of course, just because I'm biased, this was one of my favorites. I think he fits their pedigree for Pittsburgh, and I think he's going to fit in that defense well. I mean, we're talking about a guy who just 2 years ago had 83 solo tackles. And I think he's going to be able to get on the field and kind of be that tackle production machine like that, and kind of, slide up from where he was last year, obviously, when he only played 7 games, and kind of have some production that's relevant there.
And I was wrong. Sorry, folks. Robert Spillane signed with the Raiders, not the Steelers, so I had the wrong team there. But Gary, I know you had liked Cole Holcomb previously. Do you like the fit here with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who kind of seem to be rebuilding on the fly, but keeping most of their defense together?
No, I
don't like the fit.
No, I don't like that. I think he fits. I think Justin had nailed that. I think he fits his whole MO. But since Shazier or earlier, we haven't seen, Tomlinson get his shit together with his inside linebackers consistently, at least from the aspect as from a fantasy football, Right. I mean, I did like Holcomb with Riviera because he was a Riviera dude, and he just knew he was going to keep getting fed back in there, but with a totally different change. I'd already come back down off of him again this year because he got hurt again. You got to nick these guys. You got to do something to split these hairs. But I don't like him because he does fit in Pittsburgh, and I'm afraid that he's not going to be productive, or he's not going to get the snaps, or he's not going to be on the field because, as I said, he fits the bill.
All right, moving down our list here. Next up is Quincy Williams, brother of Quinnen Williams. He re-signed to stay with his brother on the New York Jets. 3 years, up to $21 million. Last year or so, he has sort of filled in as the second linebacker next to C.J. Mosley there for the Jets after he was claimed off of waivers being cut by the Jaguars. Justin, Quincy Williams is one of those guys that's sort of divisive in the fantasy community, as some people really liked his athletic profile and were surprised by the cut. Started showing up for the Jets. There's other people that aren't completely bought in with him. How do you feel about him now that he's back, the same team he's been at for about a year and a half?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, the consistency, when you get to stay in the same scheme and you kind of build that consistency on any team, I think it does help. Is he going to be a top producing guy? No, but I do think he'll have some relevancy to creep up there and have some good games. Not somebody I'm going to run to the window to draft by any means, but I don't hate the fit.
Gary, I know you've been a little bit more critical of him and his viability for fantasy leagues, but do you like the re-signing there?
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, the guy, we're going to mention again, he's got a stud brother that plays on the defensive line. All right. And I think me and Johnny the Greek on the Players Pod had just talked the shit out of this past year. This is why this guy is a starter in this league right now, period. As far as I'm concerned, PFF agrees with the 55. I don't think he's ever had anything that's even been on par. He's productive by default. Now, that was a little bit more productive by default the year prior to this past season. basically because he didn't have known Alexander sitting there, splitting some snaps with him. He had some injury issues. But I mean, the guy is productive by default, and that counts in IDP.
Yeah.
So just like what Justin had mentioned, this guy's name's going to slide down the draft board this year. His value is going to be down. I don't care what the scenario is, why this guy's there. But until we see some big ass huge signing or anything different, I think this signing clearly shows that, he's got potential to be a solid LB1. If we could get consistency out of him, there's even a higher ceiling, because Mosley, I don't know how much longer he's going to be there. Who knows? Who knows where the hell they do?
Yeah, Mosley's got a few years on his contract, and as long as he's starting, I think that he's going to be what's standing in the way of Quincy Williams, because Mosley's getting you 160 some tackles, year after year since he came back from injury and from being on the COVID list. So if he takes a step back, it's only going to help Quincy again, unless there's something else that comes along in terms of a draft pick or free agent signing.
Well, I swear I had a dream a while back, man. In this dream, his big brother comes running out into the huddle and everything. And then he goes like this, and his little brother comes trotting off on his hand onto the field. It was the craziest freaking dream I ever had in my life, man.
So if you're keeping track, Gary's now dreaming about the Williams brothers on the Jets. So
man, IDP.
If you can decipher what that means, let us know in the comments. And we'll be back to that right after this.
What's that? Your computer has another virus? Well, my friend, you need help to stop your obsession with the dirty O. All of this searching for air yards and yards after catch and blah, blah, blah. Stop your dirty O obsession by searching for the IDP Pro Players podcast instead, and focus on the other side of the balls. I mean ball. The crew on the IDP Pro Players podcast care about you and your technology by holding true to their no dirty O mantra. Every week, Gary and John bring you the IDP content you need to save your rosters and dominate your league while avoiding the dirty O. So save your technology by tuning into the IDP Pro Players podcast with your longtime and totally unoffensive veteran hosts, Johnny the Greek and Gary the IDP tipster. Follow them on Twitter at I, D, P, RO. One word at the IDP Pro Players Pod.
Next linebacker up here is a guy that you're familiar with from the NFC North, Justin. Eric Kendricks, going from Minnesota, where he was an All-Pro. He was a Pro Bowler over the course of his 8 years there. He's moving on to the Los Angeles Chargers, who have sort of had issues finding consistent linebacker play the past few years. He's getting a little bit older. Again, he's been in the league about 8 years, but 2 years, $13.25 million to a team that certainly has aspirations of being better than it was last year, and taking that step towards a Super Bowl team. Do you think he can sort of bring some consistency? And I guess that's just the biggest issue, is consistency with the Los Angeles Chargers linebacking play there, Justin.
I think so. I think the Chargers have some good pieces, right? But they have been lacking that consistency. And I think Kendricks can be that guy. He's shown that he can kind of stand out and help a defense stick together. And I think that's what he's going to do for the Chargers.
Gary, I know you were hoping Drew Tranquill might come back there and sort of be the guy there.
I'm freaking searching right now, man. Just hold on. I want to make sure that there wasn't. I checked right before the show because I would like to see that combination of Kendricks and Tranquill. Yes, I think Tranquill should have fucking been re-signed. Excuse my language. Pardon me.
If you watched the show before, seen Gary on any other pods, Drew Tranquill is one of his boys, so he's a little bit
and I don't
collar for this one.
I don't get it. I mean, they could have probably signed him for beans. We've just talked about, or I've mentioned, I keep saying about this flooded market. So they probably could have signed him. And I mean, considering that Kendricks is on his downslide, and then you got Tranquill that just got his feet. They just went through their 4 years with him, or 5 years, whatever the hell it was. And they took all this time, and yet, bam, what the hell's this? No, maybe they didn't offer enough, and Tranquill, turn it down. Shame on him. But either way, I think he's still got enough talent that he's going to end up in like Philadelphia or somewhere. And I think Tranquill will be fine. I hope that that I'm praying. As far as Kendricks, I don't give a shit.
Well, we're going to do one more here before we end the show. We're going to go to a guy that's been productive for the Indianapolis Colts. Bobby Okereke went from there. He got a nice contract, 4 years, $40 million for the New York Giants. Now, he hasn't been one of those guys that's necessarily graded out the best, especially if he's, look more in like pass rushing, that type of stuff. But if you're talking about just a linebacker that can stay out there for all 3 downs, get you the tackles that you want, sort of be the leader, maybe Blake Martinez a few years ago. That's something that looks like he could do, and they're expecting him to do on that Giants defense. Gary, you're probably not as upset about this one, but how do you feel about it from an IDP perspective with him in the middle of the Giants defense?
Oh, you gotta love it. I mean, it was just a few weeks ago. Him and Pratt were my favorite 2 free agents this year. I thought both would land these kind of opportunities, but just Okereke, knowing this Giants defense, Crowder, all the prior history of this position and what he's probably going to be doing. I mean, this guy all of a sudden is a bargain top tier LB1.
Justin, you liking it as well?
Yeah, I agree. And I think the Giants intend to use him and get him involved as much as they can. So, yeah, I definitely like it. I think it's going to be a good move for him.
And that's going to do it for our linebacker segment of the free agent signings. We're probably going to be moving into some more of the defensive backs, defensive linemen next week. But Justin, thank you so much for coming on the show here again. And why don't you go ahead and plug your podcast and tell everyone where they can find you again.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, guys. It's been fun. I always enjoy getting to talk some defense because I am a Bears fan, and that's what the Bears are all about, or used to be anyways. Follow me at Twitter at JMarkFootball. Follow Old Fashioned Football at Old Fashioned FB. We just created a Twitter on that since we're getting ready for the launch. And stay tuned to see who that guest is.
Gary, throw out one guess.
One guess what?
For his guest. Just one defensive player name that no, you don't got one.
I don't know what I'm guessing.
For his guest on April 4th, the launch of the
guess the guest. I got it now. See, look, man, come on, you gotta help me out. Let's see, one, and we're talking Brian Urlacher.
That'd be sweet, but no.
All right, well, we tried.
Yep.
So thanks everyone for tuning in again. This has been the IDP Pro Manager Podcast, brought to you by the Sports Gambling Podcast Network and WinBet Sportsbook. We will be back next week, and have a great day, everybody.